right, so, excuse me, what else was I going to say? So, then there's the issue of crime, um, especially here in Petrograd, it being, the port city, a capital, and basically all sorts of degenerates here, I guess because of the feudal, czarist degenerates and, capitalist exploiters. So I guess, that encourages, they're a model for the street criminals. Um, so by January 10th, crime was out of control here, and that was like the first issue for the Emergency Commission of Public Safety, let's call it. Uh, and let's see, you had robberies and murders, and then in response, lynchings. In 1 week, around I guess January 10th, you have 40 murders here. Um, January 10th, you had 8 major thefts, 32 petty thefts, 6 destruction of stores, and 1 destruction of a public building. 5 corpses were found, and there were 60 incidents a day, basically. So, and in response, the I don't have who did it, but I would imagine the Committee of Public Safety or the local Soviets, they killed 25 bandits, 9 cops from the old regime, and 4 civil servants. And so, like a lot of these officers, also, yeah, that was the other thing, was a lot of these officers and cops from the Tsarist regime would then become criminals, right? Because they would basically be, they weren't workers, so they had no place in the society. They were under some, restrictions or monitoring as the military, paramilitary wing of the old regime, and thus objectively hostile to the revolutionary government. And same thing for, I guess probably most of the old civil servants. They were bootlickers, basically. Like I worked with that, or, like had to live under that sort of scum in Chicago. And yeah, I can tell you, co-workers, especially, well, wherever, but especially at the airport, bootlickers, snitches, Nazis, just Uncle Toms, wetbacks, just gusanos, just the scum of the earth, like half the airport there, more than half. Yeah, more than half of them were, well, I'll be generous, I'll say half of them, but probably more than half, 2/3 probably were fucking rats, right? So, and, and one of my buddies, or more than one, he, was a current or former criminal, and they were more trustworthy than a lot of these fucking Uncle Toms and, wetback scum. So, as far as I was concerned, and then cops, oh yeah, you had wetback cops especially. And then, like one guy, he was kind of a creep. He was not Mexican, he was some sort of Germanic creep. And then this gun range I went to like once or twice after they changed hands. I guess they had like Hasidic ownership. And then they sold out to these Mexicans who were also cops in Lincolnwood, Illinois. And the son was a real piece of shit. He was harassing people who were probably, if you were Mexican, he wouldn't harass you probably, but, if you weren't Mexican, he'd demand, like, to show your, like, firearms ownership ID card to be in the store, and, just looking at the cops who used to hang out there, they were douchebags. So, this is the kind of scum in Chicago, in America, that, yeah, I could easily see them basically becoming armed robbers. The chief of detectives in Chicago got bored, and he started a jewelry theft ring. That gives you an idea of like the moral caliber of the police in Chicago. Probably I was told 3/4 of the cops in Chicago are on the take from the cartel. Probably half of those are forced to take, but still, it's a very dirty place. Um, so now maybe I'm overly pessimistic. I'll just quickly say about Chicago because I worked with the scum of the earth there, and they were the ones that ran Chicago. And you look at the rest of Chicago. Well, like you have people who are like decent to halfway decent. So maybe it's only a third of Chicago that needs to be shot or gulagged, but it's a large number, I'm sure. If we ever had a Cheka in Chicago, which I hope one day we might. It's probably unrealistic, but if we ever had one, yeah, going through who needs to be shot or put in a concentration camp for 25 years or 10 years, yeah, I'm sure that would be a significant bulk of the city there. Anyway, so by the winter of 1917-1918, even high government officials like Uritsky were mugged, and Uritsky was mugged for his fur coat while walking from, like, I think it was Centralny, Volstania here, to the Smolny, which is, maybe a couple miles. He was going through the back alleys. They left him his fur hat because I think I read it was minus 20 out, and he was going to die or something, or be in serious trouble. But they stole his fur coat, and yeah. So then, in response, again, the people of the Soviet Republic started to lynch these criminals spontaneously because basically the Red Guards, the police, the armed units of local councils were insufficient to solve the problem. So basically, the normal people who weren't shit. They saw the shit, the criminals, the ex-pigs, the, ex-officer, anti-communist freaks, and, these rat, government workers from before, and, plus the hardened recidivist criminals, basically murdering people or mugging them or, sort of like in New York where you had basically these lumpen proletarians, and Bernard Goetz one day, first he gets savagely beaten because he's white and Jewish and, what do you call it, a craftsman, so he doesn't look like a big fucking douchebag, scumbag. So, these fucking hooligan, they call them, here in whatever Russia and the Soviet Republic, hooligans, there's 6 of them, from the Black Ghetto. They mugged him with a screwdriver, I think the second time. The first time they just, I don't know, whatever, maybe they had a screwdriver, or they gave him a savage beating. He went to the hospital, he pressed charges, and then, the scum that run New York, the liberal scum as well as the, the liberal scum were running New York, and they're like, oh, these poor, ghetto youth, no, you're white, you deserve it, I guess, so, you're not a lumpen proletarian piece of shit, which, we love these scumbags because they help to terrorize normal people like you, so we can continue to steal. Basically, that's how it works in especially shitholes in America, like Chicago or New York or whatever. You get basically Jewish merchants, Italian, what are they, mafia types, Irish, political criminals. And they use, black thugs or Latin thugs to terrorize, the working class or the petit bourgeoisie, like Bernard Goetz. Well, Bernard Goetz gets himself a bodyguard 38, buys it in Florida, practices it like on like twice a month or once a month, gets good at it, and then the next time these, pieces of human shit come to basically assault him and rob him, he's like, okay, I got something for you, pulls out his gun, bam, 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 I guess a 5-shot, empties it into the scum, and that's what they did here, and that's the message, is that, you know, in America for all of my life, basically, the left was conflated with basically liberals, and the working class was conflated with the lumpen proletariat, um, and there are big issues in America, like historically, when I was born, I guess, that period of time, there was a big problem of racism with what? You had apartheid, Jim Crow. Let's call it was it Jim Crow? Whatever they called it, but I guess maybe Jim Crow, but certainly apartheid in the South, even in the North. Housing segregation. Those problems are still there, of course, but a lot of that is due to the fact that for example, half the black population, not to just pick on the black population, but half the black population that came up north 100 plus years ago, there were the refugees or the migrants due to automation in the fields down south and apartheid in the South. If you were black and you came from, say, Mississippi to Chicago, it wasn't as oppressive. And then there was the other half of the black population who were basically, and I work with some of them in the city, their ancestors were criminals, numbers runners, moonshiners, I guess even drug dealers, violent muggers, etc. And those type of people would get lynched as well. So lynching in America, I think, from my observations in contemporary America, it must not have been just a racist sort of thing in the sense of you're black, I'm white, I'm a member of the Klan, or let's say a racist who just hates black people, period, full stop. Now I'm going to torture and murder you publicly. There was that, of course, that's undeniable, but and not just among the black nationality, but among all the other nationalities, pretty much. You had a significant layer of criminals, and I would guess half the blacks anyway, that came up to Chicago, they were criminals basically, or scabs, or just parasites. And so the natural reaction so it's fascinating to read Ratkovsky here and the history here, and the more you examine the society here then, and even now, and the society in America then and now, you realize that, that's the difference. Even Nelson Peary, who helped to found in Detroit, he was a black Maoist in Detroit, he helped to found these black and white, I guess, revolutionary union movement organizations against the capitalists in Detroit. And, he said, an associate of mine pointed out to me, he said, black gangs are the most counter-revolutionary organizations in America because they're the ones that terrorize the black proletariat, which is the most revolutionary sector of American society, or, has been historically. What did they do here in Petrograd to these criminals, right? Who were in alliance with, and this is true of Chicago, with the police, with the officers, with the civil servants, the public sector workers, the normal working class people in councils, basically that's what Soviet means, council. They basically spontaneously, got so bad in terms of the murders and the robberies and the terror that they were like, okay, we have to carry out counter-terror. We have to organize this from below, so we're going to take a rope, we're going to put it around your fucking neck, and we're going to string you up on the lamppost, which is an old tradition. The French would do that to, counter-revolutionaries as well in the revolution of 1789 to 93. And that's what they did, and that's what we're going to have to do in America, and that's what a lot of the populists are about too. Is basically, there's a certain, in America everything's to the right, but the populists are to the left of the liberals. The liberals are in alliance with the worst rotten elements of the society, so people like Pelosi or Graham, in the Republicans, neocons, they're all neocons, neoconservatives, but so they steal, right? They steal from the public sector, they steal from the taxpayers. Well, I can see come November, before and after, the populists who are basically what? Main Street, say what you will. I guess probably some of them, their grandparents were in the White Citizens Council or even the Klan, but also in the Populist Party, or even perhaps, the SFTU, the Southern Federation of Tenant Farmers Union or something, whatever it's called, organized by the socialists. The South is not a monolith, and neither is the North, and populists are not a monolith, and there's different forms of populism. Anyway, everything's to the right in terms of the ideological, pronouncements in America, but basically, objectively, I think what's going to happen, what may happen, I should say, is that you're going to have a reaction from the normal, middle class store owners, Main Street types, and the working class to an extent, that, you may see people pick up their rifles or their handguns and go, when these criminals, if they start, if the scumbag liberals in the big cities start these color revolution riots again, you may see populists. I know a buddy of mine back in Oklahoma, he has my guns, and he was telling me when the color revolution riots broke out, they had some like weak ass, rainbow haired freaks at the Capitol protesting, and the normal people, or whatever you want to call them, populists in Oklahoma. Half that state is American Indian, by the way, and it's very Republican, probably going back to the Civil War, and the populists. But at any rate, yeah, because that's a big Oklahoma tradition, is like basically working class populism, farmer populism. Anyway, they all had their rifles, their AR-15s, etc. And, they just slung them over their shoulder, walked over to the Capitol, counter-demonstrated, and, they basically said to the, rainbow-colored hair liberals, if you feel froggy, jump, that is, we'll shoot you if you start, burning things, looting, and trying to beat people, or whatever. But I think those people, they weren't, well, I would guess they weren't as lumping and nasty and active and violent as they were in like Minneapolis or wherever else in the U.S. that shit was going down. So okay, 18 minutes. So anyway, yeah. So definitely that was very interesting. That here, in that book, drove home the point that, the lumpen proletariat, the criminals, the people who are just unemployed, and then certainly like cops, officers, and city workers, they're not the vanguard they're the vanguard of the counter-revolution, and they're a menace, to any sort of working class revolutionary movement in society. So, those people were like basically read out of the revolution in the end. So let me stop it there.